There's a special kind of silence that follows a betrayal. It's the silence I found myself in, standing in my kitchen in Decatur, Georgia, holding a phone that had just gone dead. My son Jamal had called me on a Tuesday evening, and behind his voice I could hear a celebration. Laughter, music, a joy I had paid for but was not invited to share. "Hey Ma, listen, don't trip, but Kendra and we got married today at the Swan House at the Atlanta History Center. It was beautiful. The world didn't tilt, it shattered. The Swan House? That wasn't a spur-of-the-moment courthouse wedding. That was a planned event, a choice." "Jamal, what? The Swan House? Baby, why wouldn't you tell your own mother?" "Let me talk to her, honey." "Yvonne, it was so magical. We wanted it to be perfect, you know? Just us and the special people in our lives. It makes the memories so pure." Special people. The words didn't land like a stone. They slithered in like a snake, cold and poisonous. I, Yvonne Thompson, who had just paid a $2,700 bill for the architect's fees for their new home renovation. I, who had transferred $1,500 for their mortgage just last week. I, who had spent 3 years and over $100,000 of my late husband Samuel's legacy building their foundation, was not special enough for a phone call, for an invitation. "I see," I said, my voice strangely flat. "Well, congratulations to you both." I ended the call. The silence in the house Samuel and I had built our life in was deafening. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. There it was, the dress. A deep emerald green, the color Jamal said brought out the light in my eyes. I'd bought it for $200, dreaming of the day I'd watch my boy become a man. Now it was just a shade of regret. Welcome, family. Thank you for finding a moment of peace to listen. If this is your first time with me, please subscribe to the channel. I want to know where in the world your heart is listening from, so drop your city in the comments below. Now, let me take you back. Let me show you how a mother's love was mistaken for a line of credit, and what happened when I finally called in the debt. Before that call, my life had a rhythm of sacrifice. After my Samuel passed from a sudden heart attack 8 years ago, my world narrowed to our son, Jamal. I worked for 30 years as an office administrator at Spelman College. It was more than a job, it was a privilege. When I retired, between Samuel's pension and my own, I had a little over $300,000. It was my rainy day fund, my security. But when Jamal met Kendra, the clouds never seemed to part. Kendra was brilliant, beautiful, and had a taste for the finer things that my gentle, hard-working son had never craved. She came from a family where appearance was everything. It started with love. "Ma, Kendra's car broke down. Can I borrow $800? "Of course, baby, anything for you." Then it became strategy. "Yvonne, this apartment is beneath us. Jamal is a project manager now. We need to live in a building that reflects that." So I gave them $15,000 for first and last month's rent and a security deposit on a high-rise in Midtown Atlanta. The borrowed money became a direct deposit for their $2,800 mortgage. The strategic living became a $45,000 down payment on a modern townhouse in East Atlanta Village. I was their silent investor, their foundation. And I allowed it. Because when they came over for Sunday supper, Kendra would hug me and say, "You're the backbone of this family, Yvonne. I don't know what we'd do without you." And I, a woman starved for that feeling of being needed, feasted on her words. I lived in the same modest Decatur home. I drove my old Camry. I saved and scrimped. I told myself it was how I was raised, but the truth was I was funding a lie. The lie that my worth was measured in the dollars I could provide. The day before the call, I was reviewing my finances. In 3 years, I had given Jamal and Kendra $106,200. It was a number that should have sent me into a panic. Instead, it just made me tired, a deep, soul-level exhaustion. And then the phone rang, the celebration in the background, the 4 words that set me free. Just the special people. I stood in my silent kitchen, and for the first time, I heard the value of my own soul. and it was worth far more than $106,200. The days after the call were a blur of quiet realization. I was Yvonne Thompson, a woman who had helped educate generations of young black women at Spelman, and I had failed to teach my own son the value of a mother's heart. The hurt was a low, constant hum, like a refrigerator in the night. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply stopped. I stopped checking my phone for his name. I stopped planning meals he might enjoy. I untangled my heart, thread by painful thread. Then the demand came. It was a week later, and it was Kendra. Her voice was sweet syrup, but I could hear the panic underneath. Yvonne, hi. Hope you're well. Quick question. The mortgage payment didn't come through. I know you're busy, so I just wanted to remind you before we get a late fee. Remind you? As if I'd forgotten to take out the trash. As if I hadn't been deliberately erased from their lives. I didn't forget, Kendra. I canceled it. The silence was so deep I could almost hear her recalculating her entire life. Canceled it? What does that mean? Yvonne, we have that meeting with the contractor for the kitchen renovation next week. The deposit is due. Then I suggest you and Jamal discuss your budget. My finances are no longer your concern. You're his mother. How can you do this to him after everything he's done for you? What he's done for me. He had taken my money and given me crumbs of his time. He had taken my love and given me a role as a supporting character in his life. He got married, Kendra. He doesn't need his mother anymore. He made that very clear. I hung up. The calm that settled over me was not peace, but purpose. The grief had burned away, leaving behind a clean, sharp resolve. I went to my desk and became an accountant of my own heartbreak. I laid it all out. Mortgage payments, $2,800 times 36 months, $100,800. Down payment on townhouse, $45,000. Investment in Jamal's Consulting LLC, $25,000. Car note, vacations, gifts, $18,400. I had given them nearly $200,000. The number was so absurd it almost made me laugh. I could have bought a small house. I could have traveled the world. I could have insured my grandchildren's college funds. Instead, I had bought my own exclusion. My phone lit up. Jamal. I didn't answer. His voicemail was a performance of wounded pride. Ma, what is this? Kendra's crying. You're really going to hold a grudge over a wedding? We were trying to do something different. You're being selfish. Call me back. We need to talk about this. Selfish. The word echoed in the quiet house. Is it selfish to want to keep what is yours? Is it selfish to stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm? The next day, I went to my credit union in Decatur. My financial advisor, Ms. Irene, who had known Samuel, looked up with a warm smile. Yvonne Thompson, here for the monthly to Jamal? No, Irene, I'm here to end it. All of it. And I need to make sure my accounts are locked down tighter than Fort Knox. She didn't ask questions. She saw the look in my eyes, a look of a woman who had finally come home to herself. All right now, she said, turning to her computer. Let's get you free. As she worked, I felt a weight lift. This was the first step. But I knew the children I had raised in comfort would not go quietly into a life of financial responsibility. The storm was coming. And for the first time, I was ready to stand in the rain. The peace I felt after leaving the credit union was fragile, like morning dew. I knew it wouldn't last. When you've been the steady rock in someone's life for decades, they don't just accept it when you decide to roll away. They try to dig you out and put you back in your place. The first sign of the coming storm was a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of a beautiful, laughing baby boy sent to me by my old neighbor, Sister Clarice, from church. The caption read, "Saw your Jamal and his wife at the grocery store. Didn't know they had a baby. He looks just like Samuel. Congratulations, Yvonne, a grandson." I stared at the photo until the screen went dark. My hands were numb. A grandson. They had a child, and I hadn't been told. This wasn't an exclusion from a wedding. This was an eradication from a lineage. This was them building a family tree and cutting off my branch. The pain was so physical I had to sit down. It felt like a hand had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it burst. I cried then. Not quiet, dignified tears, but great, heaving sobs for the grandson I might never hold, for the son who had become a stranger, for the grandmother I would never be allowed to be. But from the ashes of that grief, a steelier resolve was forged. If they could hide a child from me, then there was no depth to which they would not sink. My love was not just unwanted, it was deemed unworthy. 2 days later, the storm hit my doorstep, literally. I was working in my garden, planting some new azaleas, when a sleek black sedan pulled up. It wasn't Jamal's car. Out stepped Kendra, a man in an expensive-looking suit, and a woman holding my grandson in a carrier. My breath caught in my throat. They used my grandson as a shield, a prop to soften me. "Yvonne, look who we brought to see his grandma." The man, who introduced himself as Attorney Miles, gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to speak with you about a matter of some urgency." I didn't invite them in. I stood my ground on my own porch, my gardening trowel still in my hand. "You can speak right here." "Mrs. Thompson, your family is deeply concerned. Abruptly severing financial support, especially when it was a relied-upon component of a contractual agreement, can have serious consequences." "Contractual agreement? What contract?" "The house, Yvonne. You gave us the money for the down payment. That was a promise, an understanding. We've made life decisions based on that understanding. We started a family." I looked at my grandson, his perfect little face shaded from the Atlanta sun. They were using him as a bargaining chip, my own flesh and blood weaponized against me. "The only understanding was that I was your mother and you were my son. You broke that. There is no contract for love. It's given freely or it's not given at all." Jamal finally spoke, his voice strained. "Ma, this is ridiculous. We're not asking for a handout. We're talking about the money you already promised. For our future. For his future." He gestured to the baby. "Mrs. Thompson, my clients are prepared to argue that the funds for the down payment constituted a verbal contract for an intergenerational property transfer. If you force our hand, we will have to file a lawsuit for breach of that agreement. It would be messy, and given your advanced age and recent erratic financial behavior, a judge might very well place your assets under a conservatorship for your own protection." There it was, the threat. Not just to sue me for the money I'd already given, but to have me declared incompetent, just like I feared. They weren't just trying to get my money. They were trying to take my freedom. I looked at Jamal, my boy, my heart. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at my azalea bushes, his jaw clenched. He was complicit. He was letting his wife and a lawyer threaten his mother with being put in a legal cage. The last thread of hope I had for him snapped. "Get off my property." "Yvonne, be reasonable." I said, "Get off my property. Now. And if you ever use my grandson as a pawn to manipulate me again, you will regret it. That is a promise." The silence was heavy. Attorney Miles looked startled by my forcefulness. Kendra scowled. Jamal finally looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a flicker of something. Shame, maybe, or fear. They left. I stood on my porch, watching the black sedan disappear. The scent of fresh-turned earth and azaleas filled the air. I had just faced down a lawyer and my own family. My hands were shaking, but my spirit was steady. I went inside and called the number Miss Irene had given me for a lawyer, a woman named Brenda Shaw who specialized in elder law. "Miss Shaw," I said when she answered, my voice clear and strong. "My name is Yvonne Thompson. My son is trying to steal my life from me. I need your help to stop him." The war was no longer cold. It was very, very real, and I was done playing defense. Brenda Shaw's office was in a modest building in Buckhead, but the woman herself was a force of nature. She was around my age, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a calm, deliberate way of speaking that instantly made me feel like I was in a fortress. I laid it all out for her. The $189,200, the wedding exclusion, the grandson I'd never met, the porch-side threat of a lawsuit and conservatorship. She listened, her hands steeples, not taking a single note. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Yvonne, what your son and daughter-in-law are attempting is a textbook case of elder financial exploitation. The use of a grandchild as emotional leverage is particularly vile. But they've made a critical error." "What's that?" "They threatened you with a lawyer present. That's witness testimony, and they drastically underestimated you." She opened a fresh legal pad. "We are not going to wait for them to sue us. We are going to go on the offensive. We will be filing a civil suit for the return of the $189,200 as gifts given under false pretenses." "A suit? My suit? Against my own child?" The air left my lungs. "Sue Jamal? I don't want to destroy him." "You aren't destroying him. You are teaching him. You are establishing a boundary in the only language he and his wife seem to understand, the language of law and finance. This action forces them into a discovery process. We can subpoena their financial records. We can show a judge the sheer scale of the exploitation. It is the single most powerful way to protect yourself from their conservatorship threat. A judge will see a woman lucid and strong enough to fight for what is hers." She was right. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about vaccination. I was inoculating myself against their poison. I signed the retainer. I gave Brenda every bank statement, every check image, every text message where they'd asked for money. Building my case felt like building a new version of myself, one made of steel and spine. A week later, Jamal was served with the lawsuit at his office. The fallout was immediate and vicious. My phone blew up. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Voicemails from Kendra, screaming that I was a monster, that I was tearing my family apart. One from Jamal, his voice broken with a rage I'd never heard. "How could you do this to us, Ma? To your own grandson? We'll fight this. You'll lose. Everyone will see you're just a bitter old woman." Bitter old woman. The words stung, but they no longer stuck. I was no longer the woman who defined herself by his approval. I followed Brenda's advice. I did not engage. I blocked their numbers. I lived my life. I went to my book club. I volunteered at the church food pantry, finding solace in serving others. I even started sitting in on a seniors finance class at the local community center, reclaiming my power dollar by dollar. My friends, my true family, closed ranks around me. Sister Clarice from next door would come over with a plate of food and no questions asked. My circle from Spellman would take me out for lunch, reminding me of the woman I was before I became just Jamal's mom. I was healing. But the legal battle was just heating up. Their lawyer, Miles, filed a motion to dismiss our suit, claiming it was a frivolous family dispute. The day of the hearing arrived. I put on my emerald green dress. Not for a wedding, but for a war. The courtroom was cold and imposing. Jamal and Kendra sat on the other side, not looking at me. Their lawyer argued that I was a voluntary benefactor, that there was no contract, that I was simply having donor's remorse after a family squabble. Then it was Brenda's turn. She stood, a picture of calm authority. "Your Honor, this is not donor's remorse. This is exploitation remorse. My client, Yvonne Thompson, was systematically bled dry by the defendants. This is not about a family squabble over a wedding invitation. This is about the calculated, cruel exclusion of a mother after she had financed every aspect of the defendants' lives, followed by legal threats when she finally said no more. She approached the judge, handing him a bound financial summary. The defendants received $189,200 over 3 years. During that same period, they excluded Mrs. Thompson from their wedding, hid the birth of her grandchild from her, and then, when she rightfully ceased funding their lifestyle, arrived at her home with an attorney, the same attorney representing them today, and threatened to have her declared incompetent and have her assets seized if she did not continue to pay. She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. They didn't just want her money, Your Honor. They wanted her silence, her compliance. They wanted to own her. We are simply asking for the return of what was taken under these false pretenses of love and family. The judge, a weary-looking man with intelligent eyes, looked over the documents. He looked at Jamal and Kendra. He looked at me, sitting straight in my green dress. Motion denied. This case will proceed to discovery. I am also, based on the allegations presented today, issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting the defendants from contacting the plaintiff, Yvonne Thompson, or from initiating any separate legal proceedings regarding her competence or assets. Court is adjourned. Just like that, we had won the first major battle. The conservatorship threat was neutralized. As we walked out of the courtroom, Jamal finally caught my eye. The rage was gone, replaced by a stunned, hollow look. The reality of what he had done, suing his own mother, being sued by her, was finally dawning on him. I felt a pang of sorrow, not for the man he was, but for the boy he had been. But I did not stop. I walked past him, out into the Atlanta sunlight, Brenda Shaw by my side. I had faced the dragon, and I had not been burned. I had learned to breathe fire. The war wasn't over, but I had just taken back my kingdom. Winning in court that day was a strange kind of victory. It didn't feel like celebration. It felt like a long, slow exhale after holding my breath for years. The temporary restraining order was a shield, but the silence that followed was its own kind of echo chamber. I had proven my strength, but in doing so, I had cemented the chasm between me and my son. The discovery process in our lawsuit began. Under subpoena, Jamal and Kendra's financial records were laid bare, and what they revealed was even more staggering than I had imagined. Brenda Shaw called me into her office, a grim smile on her face. She spread the documents across her desk. Yvonne, they weren't just spending your money. They were leveraging it. They took out a second mortgage on the townhouse 6 months ago. They used your down payment as their equity. They took that $45,000 gift and turned it into $100,000 of debt. I felt dizzy. They hadn't just been living off me. They had been building a house of cards with my savings as the foundation. And look here, she continued, pointing to another sheet. Their credit card statements. Luxury resorts, designer bags, 5-star dinners, all while you were paying their mortgage. They weren't in need, Yvonne. They were greedy. The final blow was a line item from their bank statement. A $5,000 payment to a luxury wedding planner at the Swan House, dated the same week they'd told me they were struggling and needed help with property taxes. The evidence was overwhelming. It painted a picture not of a struggling young couple, but of calculated users who saw my generosity as their entitlement. A week later, Attorney Miles called Brenda. They wanted to settle. The settlement meeting was held in Brenda's conference room. Jamal and Kendra looked like different people. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pale, pinched anxiety. They had seen the evidence we had. They knew they would lose, and losing meant a public judgment that would ruin their credit and their carefully curated image. My clients are prepared to offer a one-time payment of $50,000 to resolve this matter and avoid further familial strife. Brenda didn't even blink. She slid a single piece of paper across the table. The offer is non-negotiable. Mrs. Thompson will sign a quitclaim deed, formally severing any speculative claim they have on her property. They will repay $125,000 of the $189,200, acknowledging the return of a substantial portion of the gifts. And they will sign a legally binding agreement never to initiate any legal action against her regarding her person or assets again. In return, we drop the lawsuit. $125,000? We don't have that. You have a townhouse with significant equity, largely thanks to my client. You can refinance, you can sell. Those are your choices. Jamal finally spoke, his voice hollow. He looked only at me. Ma, is this really what you want? To leave us with nothing? I looked at my son, not at the man in the suit, but at the boy I remembered. I felt a profound sadness, but no hesitation. I am not leaving you with nothing, Jamal. I am leaving you with what you always told me was most important, your independence. You have each other. You have your careers. You have your son. That is more than enough to build a life on. It's more than you left me with." The truth of that hung in the air. I had given them everything, and they had left me with silence and a lawyer's threat. They signed the agreement. 2 months later, the $125,000 was wired into my account. It felt less like a victory and more like a return of a piece of my soul. I had my money back, but I knew I would never get back the years, the hope, or the grandmother I was supposed to be. So what does a woman do with her freedom and a reclaimed fortune? She builds a new life, a life for herself. I didn't move. I loved my home. Instead, I invested in it. I finally got that new central air conditioning. I remodeled the kitchen, not for a son who might visit, but for me, because I loved to cook. I took a portion of the money and created the Samuel Thompson Legacy Scholarship at Morehouse, a small grant for students studying business ethics. It felt like a way to honor my husband, and perhaps, in some small way, atone for the lack of it I had enabled in my own son. I traveled. I went to Ghana with a group from my church, walking the bridges at Kakum National Park, feeling the ancient earth of my ancestors under my feet. It grounded me in a history far larger than my own pain. My life filled up, with my friends, with my volunteer work, with peace. The hole Jamal had left was still there, but it was no longer a bleeding wound. It was a scar, a reminder of a battle I had survived. I heard through the grapevine, Sister Clarice was a reliable source, that Jamal and Kendra had to sell the townhouse in East Atlanta. They moved into a small apartment in a less fashionable suburb. Kendra had to go back to work full-time. They were living, for the first time, within their own means. I sometimes wonder if Jamal ever thinks of me, if he looks at his son and feels a twinge of regret for depriving him of a grandmother. I hope so. Not for my sake, but for his. Because regret means he's learning. My dear friends, we have come to the end of this story. This journey was the hardest of my life, but it taught me a lesson I want to leave with you. Love should not be a transaction. It should not have a price tag. Your worth is not measured by the dollars you can provide to those who only see you as a resource. True family, true love, respects boundaries. It gives freely, without manipulation. It shows up for the milestones, not just for the bills. Setting a boundary is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of self-respect. And sometimes, the most powerful word in any language is a quiet, firm no. I often think about that lavender dress still hanging in my closet. I don't look at it with sadness anymore. I look at it as a symbol of the woman I was, who believed love could be bought, and a reminder of the woman I became, who learned that the most valuable things, your peace, your dignity, your soul, are truly priceless. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Could you have walked away? I read your comments and I learn from your strength too. Thank you for listening to my story. This is Yvonne Thompson, signing off with a heart that is, finally, at peace. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel for more journeys of the heart. And if you have your own story of finding strength, I would be honored if you shared it in the comments below. Until next time, remember to protect your peace. It is the most precious thing you own.